Welcome to Employee Wellbeing, how managers inspire, facilitate, and support employee caring activities. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Yusra Benjeloun, Administrative Coordinator and Project Manager with the Work Wellness and Disability Prevention Institute, and I'll be moderating the webinar today. This webinar is part of our Harnessing Talent Alliance series. Harnessing Talent Alliance for Recruiting and Retaining Canadians with Disabilities is a 3-year project funded by Employment and Social Development Canada. We would like to thank our 9 founding partner organizations as well as our academic team. If you would like to learn more, please visit us at harnessingtalentalliance.ca and follow us through our Harnessing Talent social media channels. This webinar is made possible through the support of the Community Gaming Grant Program through the BC government, as well as donations and memberships to WWDPI. We thank our program partners, Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work, Education Advisory Committee, and speakers who contribute to this webinar series. Our presenter today is Dr. Anna Barrio. Dr. Anna Barrio began her career as a certified public accountant and then transitioned to a financial services organization when she served in a number of capacities over 25 years, including Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer of the institutional trust business. She approached each position with a belief in a culture of business partnership and a desire to enhance the employee experience in the workplace. In 2003, her passion for employee growth and development led her to transition to human resources, where she served as an internal development consultant. Most recently, Dr. Barrio consults and is an adjunct management professor at Pace University in New York in the United States. Anna, welcome. We are very impatient to absorb all your knowledge about employee well-being. I will let you take over and walk us through how managers inspire, facilitate, and support employee caring activities.
Very good. Thank you, Yusra. And thank you to all of you for taking the time to join us today to address the topic of employee well-being. As you heard from the introduction, this is an area that has been of personal interest to me for a very long time. But more important, we're seeing increased attention on employee well-being in both scholarship and practice. For example, in 2019, the Business Roundtable, which represents the chief executives of nearly 200 large companies, issued a statement about the purpose of a corporation. They said business leaders should commit to balancing the needs of shareholders with customers, employees, suppliers, and local communities. To me, this statement is very encouraging. It's a shift away from shareholders as the sole focus of organizations. Now, there are many things an organization can do to meet the needs of its employees. Today, we'll be talking about the impact that managers have on employee well-being. And a focus on the role of managers is supported by the work of the Gallup organization. In a recent book titled It's the Manager, we are informed that the new workforce wants their work to have deep mission and purpose. They want coaches that inspire them, communicate with them, and develop their strengths. Gallup asked, who is the most important person in your organization to lead your teams through these changes? And their answer is, it's your managers. As you can see here on the cover, Gallup finds that the quality of managers and team leaders is the single biggest factor in your organization's long-term success. So we see a convergence of increased interest in employee well-being and recognition of the key role managers play in the success of organizations. And this is directly aligned with our conversation today. To give you an idea of what we'll be covering, we'll start with the definition of well-being, briefly discuss how my research was conducted, and then spend the bulk of our time on the study findings, the manager behaviors that employees perceive, inspire, facilitate, and support employee well-being. Well-being is a very broad topic. And before I share the definition that I used in my research, I want to pause here and ask you to think about how you define well-being. What does it mean to you? What do you think of when you hear the words employee well-being? Take a minute just to jot down your definition. And then once you have the definition, please type in some keywords in the question box on your screen. And Yusra will read them off for all of us to hear.
Okay, so I'll start by reading a few keywords that were typed in. Mental health, emotional health and emotional state, finding a sense of work-life balance, a sense of connectedness and feeling like your work is valued, opportunity to grow in a position, opportunity to make decisions relating to position, being supported by peers, work-life balance again, a feeling of job satisfaction, and safety.
Okay, thank you, Yusra. So the words that I'm hearing give me an indication that you view well-being as more than the absence of illness, right? When we talk about a sense of connection, a sense of value, um, those are all things that go beyond the traditional view of well-being as the absence of illness. And this is consistent with positive psychology, which uses terms such as thriving and meeting one's potential. For those of you who want to hear more about positive psychology, I suggest going to the website, www.dpi.org, where you'll find a series of webinars on positive psychology in the workplace. For now, we're going to focus on two terms, hedonic well-being and eudaimonic well-being. Hedonic well-being focuses on pleasure and happiness, whereas eudaimonic well-being focuses on personal growth, fulfillment, purpose, and meaning. These are very different. And I think some of the words that I heard from your definitions of well-being are aligned with this eudaimonic definition of well-being. I just mentioned the Business Roundtable, and Jamie Dimon, the chair of the Business Roundtable, said Americans deserve an economy that allows each person to succeed through hard work and creativity and to lead a life of meaning and dignity. You can see a commonality with the words in the eudaimonic definition of well-being, and well-being is leading a life of meaning. The focus of my research was just that, enhancing well-being through personal growth, specifically growth of the employee as a person, rather than professional development, which is often the focus of development in organizations. I felt we needed to go more granular in defining well-being. I asked myself, what does thriving mean? What does meeting one's potential mean? What does self-actualization mean? And these questions led me to the work of Erikson on human development, specifically one of the stages of development that focuses on generativity. And that is that we grow and develop as human beings when we contribute to others. This image shows the three areas of literature that provide the framework for my definition of well-being. From the positive psychology literature, we know that well-being encompasses personal growth. From the human development literature, we know growth is represented by caring activities. And the third and last part, we know from the goals literature that intrinsic goals and having social purpose orientation are associated with well-being. The intersection of these three bodies of literature led me to the definition of well-being that I use for my research. Generative well-being, as you see here, is the process of setting and striving to meet intrinsic goals aimed at contributing to improving the lives of others. So the key takeaways are, 1, we grow as individuals when we care for others, and 2, other oriented goals such as caring activities are associated with well-being. This concept of well-being draws on that view that well-being is more than the absence of illness. So my research question was, what manager behaviors are associated with inspiring, facilitating, or supporting employee caring activities, and thereby employee well-being? Caring activities encompasses actions taken within or outside the workplace to improve the lives of others in the community, family, and workplace. So although we're talking about managers, we're not limiting ourselves to activities in the workplace. Let me share a few examples of the caring activities participants spoke about. Half of the participants described community-related caring activities, either sponsored by the organization or self-initiated. This includes participation in caring organizations such as United Way, Toys for Tots, as well as community events such as coaching youth sports and local parish events. Participants also spoke of reaching out directly to individuals and families in need. Some participants mentioned that involvement in company-sponsored activities fueled self-initiated activities. So these company-sponsored activities acted as a jumpstart. About a third of the participants described caring activities directed towards family, including young children, elderly parents, and family members going through a challenging time. And over half of the participants discussed workplace caring activities directed at fellow employees, including their managers, to improve their colleagues' professional and personal lives. Before I get into the findings, the specific manager behaviors that participants found inspire, facilitate, or support their caring activities, I will briefly share with you the design of the study to provide a basis for understanding the results I found. I conducted the study in 3 organizations, and as you can see, they were diverse in terms of industry, type, geographic region, and number of employees. A recruitment email was sent to 220 employees, identified in collaboration with representatives from each of the organizations, and of that, 22% volunteered to participate. Participants included managers at various levels, as well as non-managers, and were diverse in terms of gender and age. I chose a multi-part strategy to collect the data. I used a questionnaire, interviews, and a follow-up group call to discuss the findings. Okay, let's turn to what you are eager to hear about, the findings. So the interrelated manager behaviors participants discussed as inspiring, facilitating, and supporting their caring activities fell into 4 themes: build relationship, cultivate, provide resources, and follow up. The themes were found across type of organization, so for-profit and nonprofit, across level, managers and non-managers, across the levels of management, whether it was senior, middle, or first-line managers that I was speaking to, and across gender and age. So let's explore each of these themes one at a time. Build relationship. The manager behaviors associated with build relationship theme contribute to building that manager-employee relationship that serves as a foundation for inspiration, facilitation, and support of employee caring activities. So it all starts here with building a relationship. There are 2 sub-themes. The first is getting to know the employee and includes asking. So what does asking look like? It is taking the time to ask questions and become acquainted with the caring activities employees are engaged in and passionate about, both within and outside the organization. Interestingly, participants placed as much emphasis on managers listening as they did on managers asking. One participant said, "My manager is attentive, but when I speak, she turns off her PC monitor." Another participant said, "Listening is giving employees the space to answer." A very powerful observation. So this is not just the manager asking a question to check off the box, but actually taking the time to listen to the response. Participants describe what being listened to feels like with phrases such as listens to my needs as an employee and as a person and cares about me as a person. Asking and listening allows managers to know what caring activities employees are involved in and opens the door to offer support. You may be thinking, are these conversations formal or informal? Individuals express different preferences. One manager indicated she takes her cue from her employees. This is part of getting to know the employee and using that knowledge to tailor relationship building to the individual rather than a one-size-fits-all approach. With these 2 behaviors, asking and listening, information flows from the employee to the manager, and the manager gets to know the employee. But a relationship is 2-directional. So let's look at the other behaviors that surfaced in this study. The second sub-theme, being approachable, contributes to employees feeling comfortable approaching the manager for support and even providing support to the manager. When participants spoke of the first behavior, they were not referring to sharing information needed to get the job done, but rather managers sharing information about themselves, information that humanizes the manager. One manager said, "I tell them about me too. I think I can't shut myself off if I'm expecting them to talk." Another said, "I have no problems affording certain aspects of my life that allow them in. I believe that makes me more approachable. If I'm asking them personal stuff and they don't know anything about me, I don't think they're going to want to talk to me." Care relates to caring about the employee as a person, caring about what the employee cares about. One participant said the act of getting to know the employee starts as something a manager should do, and over time turns into genuine care, which helps to build the manager-employee relationship. Another participant compared the actions of his current manager and those of a manager in a prior organization. He said that at first he resisted, but caring for others has become something he wants to do. I'd never seen that before, he said. It was more just about business, whereas here, there was more of a purpose than just dollars and cents. The next behavior, being accessible. Some examples you're probably very familiar with are an open door policy, walking around, and being there when an employee needs you. The next is trust in, and this relates to actions that show the manager trusts the employee, such as a manager that relies on employee judgment and expertise and seeks out employee input and delegates. The next is trustworthy. The other side of a manager trusting the employee is a manager being trustworthy. For example, doing what you say, living the values, demonstrating consistency between espoused values and enacted values. In other words, walking the talk. To wrap up the build relationship theme, managers become aware of employee caring activities by asking and listening, and creating an environment where employees feel comfortable approaching the manager and sharing what they do. By being aware of those caring activities employees are involved in, managers have information they can use to facilitate or support those activities. Interestingly, building a relationship was discussed as support in and of itself, not just foundational. For one participant, the mere act of a manager showing interest in the employee's caring activity felt as support to them. Now, building a relationship, though, is easier said than done. So I want to discuss a few of the challenges that managers spoke about as well. For example, a given behavior may be perceived as support by one employee, but not by another. It is not a one-size-fits-all solution. That's why getting to know the employee is key. Managers face competing priorities for their time, and some managers are responsible for very large groups. So to address that challenge, one participant said they distinguish between getting to know and building the relationship. They get to know all of their employees, but build the relationships with their direct reports, and that helps them make this process more manageable. So just as a point of reference, 88% of the participants mentioned one of the behaviors in the build relationship theme. The second theme is Cultivate, and Cultivate consists of 4 behaviors: plant the seed, role model, coaching, and empowerment. Plant the seed is just that. Managers inspire employees to engage in caring activities by providing ideas and opportunities. They might organize a caring event or provide information about a caring event. One participant mentioned, once employees get involved, they feel good about what they're doing and want to continue to contribute and pass this positive energy to others. Planting the seed, however, is not synonymous with the employee acting on that inspiration. Other factors are at play. Managers can inspire, but it's up to the individual to take action. The next behavior is role model. In this case, managers inspire employees by actually engaging in caring activities. So this is more than just providing information. This is where the manager engages. For example, a manager may share with employees the caring activities the manager is involved in, within or outside the organization. One participant said, the main thing that my manager does to inspire me is all the time he spends giving back to the community that we serve. So being a role model is not new to the role of manager, but the distinction here is that you're role modeling caring activities. The next is coaching. And with coaching, managers guide employees to care for others, including coaching managers to care for employees. In some cases, the coaching is initiated by the manager, and in others, at the request of the employee. For example, I know one of the participants asked her manager to share his experience of sitting on a nonprofit board. This is something she wanted to do. She aspired to be on the board of a nonprofit. So she's asking her manager, what did you do? Help me understand the steps. What do I need to do? Another example is a senior manager coaching a first-line manager to help grow staff into managers. The fourth behavior, empowerment, was unexpected. Much has been written about managers empowering employees, but I had not expected to hear participants discuss empowerment as a way managers support employee caring activities. Empowerment in this context provides employees the freedom to care for others. It was discussed in several ways, as the freedom to make a judgment call to assist colleagues without first consulting their manager, as having the support of their manager to engage in caring activities that fall outside of the job description. So being empowered provides a sense of fulfillment that carries over to other parts of their work and personal life and enhances their ability to engage in caring activities both in and outside of work. 84% of the participants mentioned one of the behaviors in the Cultivate theme. The third theme is provide resources. Provide resources relates to tangible and intangible resources provided by managers that employees can draw upon to engage in caring activities. The first of the behaviors is accommodate. Managers accommodate employee caring activities by, say, rescheduling meetings, providing flexible work hours, time off, work from home arrangements, and facilitating a change in employee status from full-time to part-time status if that meets the needs of the employee. The flexibility affords employees time to engage in caring activities and reduce the stress associated with juggling multiple demands. The second activity in this theme is support. Managers can demonstrate support in various ways. One participant said, "We have that relationship where she'll come in and we'll talk about whatever it is that she's planning on doing, and then I'll ask the question, can I help? And what support do you need from me?" Other managers use the term go to bat for the employee. She described it as advocating for the employee when support for the caring activity falls outside of the organization's standard operating procedures. She said, "I had an employee who trained dogs to assist people with blindness and asked me if he could bring the dog to work. I had to kind of go to bat because it was a little unconventional, but we did allow that, and we had Buster, a German shepherd, follow us to meetings. And he was with us probably for a good 3 to 6 months. And that brought almost a joy to the whole company, having Buster in our presence." So this is a manager whose employee comes to the manager asking to bring in a dog that he's training into the workplace. And that manager goes above and beyond to make that happen. A non-manager spoke of support from her manager in terms of encouragement. She distinguished between being allowed and being encouraged. In a prior organization, although she was provided flexibility, it was not perceived as support because the manager begrudgingly complied with the organization's policy. In contrast, the current manager goes beyond complying with policy and encourages her to engage in caring activities. Another spoke of support in a way that linked the notion of a manager providing support for employee caring activities to a manager's responsibility for running a business. He described creating an environment that is efficient and effective and thereby frees employees mentally and physically to engage in caring activities. The contribute, the third behavior here within provide resources. Managers can contribute personal time, money, or both towards employee caring activities. Managers can also coordinate a company contribution towards an employee caring activity. 88% of the participants in the study mentioned one of the behaviors in this theme. The fourth and last theme is follow-up. The follow-up theme relates to reinforcing employee caring activities. Manager behaviors include inquiring how things went after the caring activity and recognizing employees for their caring activities. The vehicle used by managers to deliver recognition varies from a nice going memo to an in-person chat to recognition in public. The behaviors in the follow-up theme were discussed less frequently. 36% of the participants as compared to 88% for build relationships, 84% for cultivate, and 88% for provide resources. Now, this may be that managers have focused on actions they can take before the caring activity to inspire an employee and during the activity to support the employee and have not recognized the power of follow-up actions. And this takes us to the next slide, the caring activity life cycle. Manager behaviors occur before, during, and after the employee caring activities. Behaviors in the build relationship theme are ongoing. They provide a foundation for manager inspiration and support. Manager behaviors in the cultivate theme, such as plant the seed and role model, occur before the employee activity and inspire an employee to become engaged. And manager behaviors in the provide resources theme, such as accommodate and contribute, occur during the employee caring activity and support the employee's activities. Manager behaviors in the follow-up theme, the one that we saw less frequent in the study, such as inquire, occur after the employee caring activity and reinforce such activities. As represented by the double-sided arrows, behaviors in the cultivate, provide resource, and follow-up phases nourish the manager-employee relationship. This temporal component, I feel, is very important and may be useful to managers as a roadmap to understand not only the behaviors they should consider, but when to engage in the particular behaviors. As part of my study, I also compared the behaviors found in the study to prior research on effective manager behaviors. I used 5 studies as a basis of comparison. The similarities of some behaviors suggest managers may be able to leverage existing skills in a new way. Skills traditionally viewed as contributing to the bottom line of an organization may also be used to contribute to employee well-being. But we also have something to learn from the differences as well. The behaviors you see here in red were addressed in 2 or fewer of the comparison studies. And the behaviors you see in blue represent behaviors where the comparative studies used similar terms, but the meaning was different. For example, relations is one of the 3 meta-categories of Buchel's taxonomy of leader behavior. The category captures people-focused behaviors such as support and recognition, but it does not capture the essence of the relationship-building behaviors participants in this study spoke of getting to know the employee as a person and being approachable. If you remember nothing else from this 1 hour, remember these words: get to know the employee as a person. When we look at trust in and trustworthy, the prevalence in this study of managers trusting in employees was comparable to that of the manager being trustworthy. So the number of participants that talked about a manager being trustworthy were as many as those that talked about the manager trusting in the employee. Yet in the comparative studies, although manager trust in employees was addressed in all 5 studies, a manager being trustworthy was addressed only in 2. This, I think, sends us a message about focusing not only on how employees gain the trust of their managers, but how managers gain the trust of their employees. Another example is care. Participants in my study added, so now we're looking at the words that are in blue, where although similar terms were used in prior studies about manager behaviors, the meaning is different. So participants in my study added a twist to the meaning of care that goes beyond empathy and is consistent with the concept of getting to know the employees as a person. Andy described it in my study as a caring about what the employee cares about. So it's not just caring about the employee, but caring about what the employee cares about. Brad spoke of taking the time to be emotionally invested to know what each employee needs in the way of support. Another example is coaching. The difference in meaning lies in the objective behind the coaching. Participants describe managers coaching others to care in contrast to coaching for professional development. We're going to turn now to something that I call the Cascade of Caring. When employees spoke about being inspired by the manager, they described themselves as developing an other orientation. Once employees get involved in a caring activity, they feel good about what they're doing. They want to continue to contribute and pass this positive energy to others. One participant shared that his manager's active involvement in the community not only has inspired him, but has changed his relationship with his family and his family's involvement in caring activities. He said, I'm just a different person now. It's not that I'm happier, but I've got a whole different focus on things in life. What I learned here is me being better for my family. Our family has now also gotten more involved in doing things. One of my daughters is now starting to volunteer at certain places, not because she has to, but because she wants to. It's contagious. It's made me better. The last item I would like to share with you today is this model of inspiration and support of caring activities. The data indicate what managers do and the impact their behaviors have is a complex phenomenon that takes place in a larger system captured in this model. The relationship behaviors we discussed are shown at the bottom as the building blocks for a strong foundation. The model, though, expands beyond the manager-employee dyad inherent in the research question to incorporate multiple sources of inspiration and support, as you see in the center. Others consist of colleagues, of family, customers, and community. Manager includes all managers within the organization to capture participant stories that support is not limited to their immediate manager. The environment boxes at the top depict the components represented in the model are part of a larger system that has the potential to influence and be influenced by the subsystem. The organization's values, the policies and practices may serve as a source of inspiration and support. Many participants, while describing manager behavior, also spoke about being inspired and supported by the values of the organization and the tone at the top, the words and actions of senior managers. The organizational values can create an environment conducive to developing a manager-employee relationship that nourishes caring activities and provides managers the confidence to advocate on behalf of employees. So if you're working for an organization that has these values, as a manager, you're more comfortable in advocating on behalf of the employee. For example, one organization in the study provides paid hours for employees to engage in community caring activities. Two organizations incorporated discussion of community involvement in the annual performance discussion. This sends a message that values are inherent to how the organization runs the business. Managers in one organization hold 10 to 15-minute informal team check-in meetings to provide staff an opportunity to discuss business issues and personal activities they want to share with colleagues. These meetings, referred to as huddle-ups, contribute to relationship building and developing a sense of community. They do this on a daily basis. They allocate those 10 to 15 minutes to have these discussions. Two organizations use their internal newsletter to inform employees about opportunities to engage in caring activities, as well as recognize employees for their engagement. The two directional hands connect the three components in the center, the manager, the employee, and others, to indicate that inspiration and support can flow in either direction. For example, although participants were asked to describe what managers do to inspire and support employee caring activities, participants shared employees are role models for managers and peers provide inspiration and support for each other. Similarly, the relationship between the organization and the employee is depicted as two directional. For example, in one organization, organization-sponsored caring activities inspired the employees to initiate the caring activities. So it's kind of a top-down, right? The organization's activities inspired employees, whereas the reverse occurred in another of the organizations. The employee-initiated caring activities inspired an organizational goal to engage in company-sponsored caring activities. In the center, the self-other orientation depicts that any element of the system, whether it's managers, employees, others, or the organization, may be self-directed, other-oriented, or both. An employee with an other orientation may be attracted to an organization because of its values, such as community and enriching the lives of others, or its philosophies that revenue growth and profits are byproducts of focusing on health, growth, and success of their employees, customers, and suppliers. On the other hand, an employee with a self-orientation might be inspired by the caring activities sponsored by the organization. At first, employees may resist getting involved or may get involved because they think it's something they need to do, but over time, involvement may shift from ought to want to, where it becomes natural and feels good. Managers need to know themselves, the employee, and the organization to assess what behaviors are the best fit for a particular employee at a particular point in time and in a particular context. So we're going to kind of wrap up the session with 3 recommendations for practice. The first is become familiar with the specific behaviors in the framework of manager behaviors. And one of the attachments that you'll have when you get the link to the slides is also 2 documents. One includes the framework for manager behaviors, and the other one is a summary of the findings. So managers can use the framework of manager behaviors as a resource to identify behaviors they can enact. Just to share a little story with you, my dissertation work for my doctorate degree was on this topic. And the president of the university that I attended was on my dissertation committee. And she wrote to me, she said, I had laminated this framework and I had handed it out to everyone who was at my final oral review. And she said, I keep that on my desk and I look at it on a daily basis to remind me of what these behaviors are. The behaviors are not discrete actions, but rather interrelated. The emphasis placed by participants on getting to know the employee as a person suggests managers interested in enhancing employee well-being can start by getting to know the employee, including understanding what's important to the employee and the orientation, self, other, or both, that guides the employee's thinking and actions. Just as important, employees can use the framework to become acquainted with the type of support they can receive and should be expecting from their managers in the organization, as well as the support they can provide to their managers and others. And development professionals can use the findings from this study to shape or evaluate manager training and coaching programs. It's also noteworthy that the behaviors managers enact are themselves caring activities. So by inspiring and supporting employee caring activities, managers may be contributing to their own well-being as well as that of the employee. The second takeaway here is understand that temporal nature. Managers can use that temporal dimension captured in the caring activity life cycle together with knowing the employee, his or her preferences, and how he or she perceives managers' behaviors to assess what behaviors in the framework are best suited for the employee. For example, a manager working with an employee who has a self-orientation might utilize behaviors in the Cultivate theme to inspire the employee, whereas an employee who has an other orientation might benefit from manager behaviors that provide support during or after the employee caring activity. That is, behaviors in the provide resources and follow-up themes. And the third takeaway is to recognize the impact of the organization. Organizations can use the framework to assess whether the organizational values, the policies, and practices provide an environment where employee caring activities can flourish. So thank you, and I think we've got plenty of time for Q&A, so I'm going to turn it over to Yusra.
Thank you so much, Anna, for this compelling webinar. To our audience, please insert your questions in the question box. We'll initiate the Q&A session by the first question. So can you give more examples of caring activities that fall outside of the workplace and that managers can initiate?
Examples outside of the workplace were very abundant. For example, I mentioned it could have been directed towards your community. It could be directed towards a family member. So there were individuals that had family members that were in need of additional attention, whether it was an elderly parent or a child. There might have been situations where they needed attention because their child was involved in certain after-school programs. There are many things. It could also be organizations. They could be involved with coaching, their children's baseball team. So all of these things are, the key to it though, is that first of all, in order for a manager to be able to support those activities that the employee is engaged in, they need to know about it. And that's where building that relationship is so key. They really need that asking and listening, asking questions, finding out what the employee is interested in, being approachable so that the employee, when you're asking, as a manager, you're asking questions, they feel that you are approachable and that you're asking those questions with genuine interest as opposed to doing something that you feel you have to do. So I think that the keys are making sure that as a manager, you're approachable, you're asking those questions, you're listening, you're getting to understand that individual as a person, that you start to care about what the individual cares about, and that you can also support that individual through some of the things we were talking about before, through coaching and through modeling.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this answer. Second question is, to the best of your knowledge, are there any major differences between for-profit and for nonprofit organizations in terms of best practices and managers' behaviors leading to the well-being of their teams?
Interesting question, and that is why when I mentioned to you just some of the background of the study, I conducted the study in 3 organizations. The thing that, one of my goals in continuing this research is to do the research outside of the US. Right now, the 3 organizations were in the US, and I'd also like to extend the research to publicly held corporations. So getting back to the question about for-profit and nonprofit, I did not find one of the 3 organizations that I did the study in was not a nonprofit. 2 were for-profit. I did not find a noticeable distinction between what I was hearing from participants in the nonprofit versus the for-profit. The piece, and why I say that I'd like to do this research, replicate the research in a organization that has stockholders, is to see whether there is any distinction there.
Thank you so much, Anna. And our next question is, did you find differences in an employee's main priority in unhealthy workplaces versus healthy workplaces, or was the relationship always up high on the list?
Okay, so one of the things that I didn't mention, because I wasn't sure how much time we had, is that I conducted the study in servant-led organizations because of the fact that I was looking for organizations that supported the growth of their employees. So my research was done, all 3 organizations, I think I would label under the healthy organizations. The one way that I can answer that question is from, if you recall, I mentioned to you one participant talked about having been in another organization before where support felt forced. So they felt like the manager was forced to support them, and they didn't view it as being support. So I think if you're in a healthy organization, the relationship between the manager and the employee is going to be stronger, and the sense that they feel supported by the manager and the organization will be healthier.
Makes sense. Next question is, are there any successful programs or guidelines that address all 4 themes and that have been implemented in the workplace?
I don't know that I would call it a program per se. And this is also why I mentioned the comparison studies, where I compared to other studies that identified manager behaviors. So I think that if you look at the behaviors that appear in each of these 4 themes, many of them overlap with what you would normally think of as good manager behaviors. The twist here is and that's why I said, if you walk away with one sentence, it's thinking about really understanding the individual as a person. When you layer that on top of the standard behaviors that you would see for effective management, you start to add another level to it. So you're not just, for example, coaching for professional development. You're coaching for that employee to care about their employees, right? Or to care about others. So I think it's not so much a different program, but it's adding another perspective, which is getting to know your employee as a person.
Mm-hmm. And next question is, how do you maintain the manager-employee relationship with regards to caring activities in a remote work culture? In other words, if the employee is working remotely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think that that would complicate being remote, especially in this day and age where so many of the employees are remote. I think building a relationship doesn't have to be face to face. That said, this is many years ago, when I first took over a very large group that was international, one of the first things that I did is ask for a budget to be able to bring all of the disparate groups together that had never met each other. So I do feel that face-to-face interaction is ideal, but not necessary for something like this. And with all of the, you can do all of these, I don't know whether it's FaceTime or any of these other things, it could feel like you're virtually in the same place. So I don't see it having a negative impact.
Thank you so much, Anna. Another question is, in your opinion, what are the major components in managerial behaviors that can help build relationships? Can you give some concrete examples of actions or behaviors that might make a manager look more approachable, for example, or more prone to building good relationships?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I mentioned it briefly in this, but I'll expand on it a bit. I worked for a manager that every morning took the time, and this was a senior manager. He had a lot on his plate, but every morning took the time to walk around and talk to individuals, which allowed employees at that point. That manager focused mostly on business. I think one of the takeaways from this research is to do those walk-arounds, have conversations with employees, but not focus the conversation solely on the business aspects. As I mentioned, one of the companies did those like 10-minute sessions every day with their groups where individuals got to talk about anything that was important for that day, whether it was personal or whether it was business. So I think walking around, having those conversations, and if it's virtual, it's picking up the phone. You may not be able to walk around if everyone is not in the same building, but picking up the phone and actually having conversations, engaging individuals so that they feel that at any point in time when they need to, they can walk into your office or give you a call and ask for your support.
Thank you, Anna. Another question is, what are the next steps following these findings? In other words, do you have any input on what can be done in order to address these themes and improve employee well-being?
Yeah, for me, I think the next steps are for each individual to really take a hard look at what these behaviors are, understanding how it fits into their particular organization. So the next step isn't just something that I can do, it's something that everyone who's on this call or listens to this webinar can do, which is to start bringing this to life within their organization, seeing how this aligns with what happens in the organization and what needs to change in the organization.
Thank you. So in your research findings, did your result conclude that managers stated the challenges of lack of time or headspace due to increased manager workloads?
Yeah, managers specifically talked about some of their challenges, and that's why I mentioned it earlier, because sometimes we just talk about the, what we can do and all of the positive side of it and forget about the challenges. So managers, I mean, I was a manager for 30 years. I understand how you're bombarded and you walk in the morning with one plan and within 5 minutes your entire plan is out the window because so many other priorities are coming your way. So lack of time is a challenge that all managers have. But one thing that I was getting from these managers is that although they know they have lack of time, they also know they need to place a priority on these things. So, just mention maybe scheduling some time to do some of these things and having those conversations. Sometimes by actually putting it on our calendar and scheduling some time, it allows us to focus on it better.
Thank you, Anna. And our last question is, if you had one message for our audience today, what would it be?
Get to know your employees as a person, as an individual. I mean, really, it sounds very basic, but that is the starting point for all of this. Once you take actions to get to know that person as an individual, they will think you're approachable. They will start to ask you questions. What are you doing as a manager? What activities are you involved? The example I gave before, someone who knew their manager was on a board of directors of a not-for-profit and asked them to coach them. So really treating your employee as a person, getting to know them as a person, caring about them is the foundational starting point.
Thank you so much. Thank you immensely, Anna, for your time and this excellent webinar. It is crucial for managers to know themselves, their employees, and the organization to determine what behaviors best fit a particular employee at a particular point in time and in a particular context. You've also shared 4 themes for managers to focus on in order to care for their teams. So build relationship, cultivate, provide resources, and follow up. So again, Anna, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and expertise.
Thank you, and thank you to all of you who are on the line.
To our audience, thank you for your participation.